Hello, everybody. Could you fly an aircraft? What do you think? No. Come on, you're speakers. Of course you could fly an aircraft. So let's take it one step further. Could you land an aircraft? And I'm not talking about toys. I'm not talking about a small Cessna or a paper plane. I'm talking about real aircraft, something like that one. What do you think? Would you be able to land it? Don't be too much. Maybe once. So, don't be too modest. You would be able to do it. Yes, you need help. You need somebody who tells you what to do, and you need somebody who tells you what definitely not to do. And I'm not saying that it's going to be a very smooth landing. And I'm not saying that the repairing is cheap afterwards. But you would be able to land the aircraft in a way that you and all your fellow passengers would survive. And this is what it's all about, isn't it? The important thing is everybody would be able to land an aircraft. Each and everyone is able to land an aircraft under ideal conditions. And this is the same with speaking. Everybody would be able to deliver a at least good speech under ideal conditions. If you have enough time to prepare, that's good. If you have a loving, caring, supporting audience, great. If you have done this speech for more than 1,000 times before, and nevertheless your speaking coach is right beside the stage to help you out if you're in trouble, then it's easy. But there are situations which are everything but perfect. In aviation, these are situations like that one. Do you remember? Oh, yeah. The landing on the Hudson. January the 15th, 2009. What had happened? They took off in LaGuardia, which is one of the New York City airports, and only a few minutes, 2 or 3 minutes after takeoff, at an altitude below 1,000 meters, below 3,000 feet, they collided with a flock of geese and both engines failed. Both. That means all engines failed. And this is not good. This is definitely not good because right now your Airbus becomes a glider and therefore it's not built. So what do you need to manage a situation like this? What kind of a pilot do you have to be to manage a situation like this? If you are the pilot of a plane in distress, it doesn't help you how good your marketing material is. Nobody cares about your shining uniform. And it doesn't make any difference how many people you have taught before how good a pilot, how good you are as a pilot. And it even doesn't make any difference how passionate you are about flying. The only thing is, did you do your homework? And it's the same in speaking. So what is the difference between a good pilot and a bad pilot? What is the difference between a good speaker and a not so good speaker? In aviation, it's a result. In aviation, a good pilot is a pilot who brings his passengers safely to the destination. And I think in speaking, there's something similar like a destination. For me, a good speaker is somebody who achieves something, who makes a change, who changes something, who makes a difference, who makes an impact, who reaches his or her audience. But what do we have to do to reach our audience? Once I attended a seminar by David Strasberg. David Strasberg is the head of the Lee Strasberg Academy, which is, I think, as far as I know, one of the most important academies for actors in Hollywood. And David Strasberg said, on stage, you have two possibilities. Either you are attractive or you are repulsive. You have only these two possibilities. Either you attract or you kick away your audience. So remember the speech yesterday by Andy Rogers, the guy with the lifeboats? Wasn't this an amazing speech? Wasn't this a cool speech, an emotionally attractive speech? Yeah? Didn't he get you? Was he true? David Strasberg said, on stage you have only two possibilities. Either you are attractive or you are repulsive. There's nothing in between. And the difference is truth. The difference is truth, but truth is much more than only authenticity. Truth is much more than only knowing your stuff, only knowing what you're talking about. And the truth is much more that you only use your stories. The opposite of truth is the mask. The mask we are all wearing. We all are wearing a mask. You are wearing a mask, you are wearing a mask, I am wearing a mask. The mask is this kind of person we like to be seen as. The mask is something good for us. The mask is cool because the mask protects me. It protects me from being hurt, from being humiliated, from being offended. But this mask also protects my internal from coming out. This mask also protects or keeps my emotions from coming out and reaching and touching you. So let's think about it. Are we willing, on stage, are we willing to let fall our mask? Are we willing to be true, or are we just playing a role on stage? A role that somebody told us we should play because a good speaker is like, or a good speaker has to do, or a good speaker is supposed to. Don't get me wrong, I'm not telling that you shouldn't care about advices. But what you do on stage, is this your true being, or is it just role playing? The first lesson you can learn from aviation is it is helpful to be true. It's helpful to be a true pilot, and it's helpful to be a true speaker. The second lesson you can learn from aviation is something about the crew. In this accident, so truth was the first one. In this accident, everybody's talking about Captain Sullenberger. Captain Sullenberger was a captain on this flight, and yes, he did an amazing job. He did a great job. He landed the aircraft on the Hudson River. But he also has had an amazing co-pilot, Jeffrey B. Skiles. So while Captain Sullenberger flew the aircraft, while Captain Sullenberger landed the aircraft, Jeffrey did all the rest. He did all the work. He performed the checklist. He prepared the aircraft for the ditching landing, for the emergency landing on the water. So they acted as a crew. They acted as pilot and co-pilot. What kinds of co-pilot do you have? Who is your co-pilot? And what is even more important, what kind of a co-pilot are you? I'm convinced to be successful in our business, and I'm doing it for quite a while. I'm convinced if we want to be successful speakers, we need help. We need assistance. You can't do it alone. And this assistance, your co-pilot, could be a mastermind group, could be your fellow PSA member, or whatever. But be careful when choosing your co-pilots, because you need a companion who is courageous enough to look into your eyes to tell you when he or she thinks you are wrong. You need a co-pilot who tells you when he or she thinks you are losing track. You don't need anybody who posts on Facebook or Twitter when you screwed up. You don't need anyone who finger points anyone's mistakes on social media. You need companions who are courageous enough to look into your eyes directly and tell you face to face when he or she thinks that you are wrong. So this is the second learning from aviation. The first one is it has to be true. The second learning is we don't do it alone. We need help. We need to have a crew. But what's the last learning? What's the third one? The third learning I got from my flight instructor. My flight instructor always said, Peter, experience is the sum of all survived mistakes. Isn't that a cool quote? I love it, but there's a mistake on it because you have to survive, otherwise you can't make any experiences. When I heard this saying for the first time, I thought only it was cool. But the really meaning I got much later. The really meaning of it I got when I was a flight instructor for myself. And believe me, when I was a young flight instructor, I wasn't a very good flight instructor. Because my students needed almost twice as many landings until their first solo flight as the students of any other teacher, of any other instructor. So if an average flight student needs about 50 landings until his first solo, my best one was at 78. So you get the first one who needs 78 landings until his first solo. You can say, well, the first one, well, maybe he is a little simple structured. You meet a second one, again, in his 80s or 90s, and you can say, well, maybe these two guys know each other. When you have this third one, you can ask yourself, why do I always get these untalented monks? Or you think about what you do when you are teaching. And this is what I did. So I analyzed, what am I doing? And I figured out, I found out I tend to do micro corrections. I tend to do all these little corrections. And I'm sure you know this. If you ever have trained somebody, if you ever try to develop somebody, then you know this is going to be a mistake far before your student recognizes anything. And it's the same in aviation. So we are sitting in this aircraft, the students try to fly an approach, and I see and I know this is not going to work. We are far too high and we are far to the left. So what did I do? I did these micro corrections. So we are far too high, so I took out a little bit of power. I reduced power a little bit. I pulled back the power level a little bit. The student didn't recognize because he was searching for the airstrip. But I took out a little bit power. I reduced power a little bit. If you reduce power on an aircraft, the aircraft does not become slower, but it starts to sink, or it increases its sink rate. So if you have been too high before and you increased your sink rate, everything is perfect. But still we are far to the left. If we are far to the left, I had to do something about this. So I applied a little bit of rudder. Rudder are these pedals, yeah? And steering this standing thing in the back of the standing fin in the back of the aircraft, yeah? If you apply rudder, the aircraft doesn't do like this. Yeah, this would be the ailerons. If you apply rudder, then the aircraft makes a little bit like, so it's moving a little bit ashamed to where it's supposed to be. So I applied rudder, and everything was perfect. Our sink rate was perfect. We are perfectly on the way to the beginning of the airstrip. We are perfectly aligned to the center line of the airfield. Everything looked great. You know what the problem was? The student was thinking it was his landing. And then I found out, and then I recognized I have to change something. I have to do something different. And in this moment, I recognized this. I invented the final Peter Brandl eternal flight instructor checklist. And this checklist also applies for business issues. It's only 2 questions. So I was sitting in the aircraft and I see, okay, he is going to make a mistake. And I asked myself 2 very simple questions. The first question, this mistake he is about to do, is this mistake going to kill us? I'm not crazy, yeah? Not let any student kill me. But you can transfer it to business issues. If you're facing a business decision and you think, if this turns out to be a mistake, you never know beforehand if it's going to be a mistake. That's the beauty about a tough decision. But you think, if this turns out to be a mistake, are we broke? If yes, don't do it. If you're facing an investment decision and you say to yourself, if this is going to be a mistake, I have to file bankruptcy, don't do it. If you're facing a private decision at home and you say to yourself, if she finds out, don't do it. But If you think, okay, if it's going to be mistakes, I will survive. Then you need a second question. Second question is, if this is going to be a mistake, is the aircraft still usable after the mistake? And this is the same with business. In business issues, you can ask yourself, can we use our system afterwards? So maybe we are not bankrupt, but we are going to suffer for years. Don't do it. Maybe if you think you lose your biggest customers, don't do it. If you lose reputation, don't do it. But if you can answer both questions with yes, yes, we are going to survive the mistake, and yes, our system is still usable. Then in the aircraft, I took the final flight instructor safety posture. So I braced myself from the chair, I tensioned my back muscles, and I waited for the impact. And it came as it had to come. Few seconds later, Earth, angry about such a bad landing, we made this boom, and Earth, angry about this bad landing, bounced up back into the air again. And after this boom, we found ourselves again on an altitude of 100 meters, 300 feet. Yeah? What do students always do in situations like this? They let loose everything. Look at me, what happened? You screwed the landing. But it didn't look that bad. I think it did. But we are again at 100 meters, 300 feet, so we could fly another round. So we did another round. And again, he was approaching much too fast at a too high speed and again this impact landing. And after the second impact, I always asked myself, Peter, this thing about the survivable mistakes, was it really that a good idea? But you know what? No one needed more than 3 impacts. None of my students needed more than 3 impacts. After maximum of 3 impacts, they all were able to do their first solo, no matter how many landings they have had before. And this was a moment I recognized, I understood something. If I'm training something, if I'm responsible for somebody, I have to give my students a chance to make survivable mistakes. I have to keep them from killing themselves. This is my responsibility. But I have to give them the chance to make survivable mistakes. And right now, I understood this is not only for flying students, this is for everybody. If you have responsibility for anybody, you should give them the chance to make survivable mistakes. This is what we need. And now you can ask yourself, am I willing to make mistakes? Do I have the courage to make mistakes? I think as speakers, if we really want to make a difference, we should be willing to make mistakes. This, what I did today, is not my typical speech. I did this for the first time. And you may have recognized this is not my native tongue. But if we are not willing to make mistakes, then we never will have any impact. And again, you know, of course, if you want to change anything, you know, you should start at once. So if you really want to start, if you really want to change anything, please ask yourself a very simple question. And this question is, which survivable mistake could I do today? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.